So one of the questions that I get asked the most is the question of, are carbs bad for me? If my goal is to lose weight, do I need to reduce carbohydrates or do I need to completely eliminate them from my diet? I can't tell you how many times clients ask me this, and family, friends, anyone who comes to me and knows exactly what I do, which is help people get transformation, get shredded, see their abs for the first time in their life. This question comes up over and over again. The thought that you need to get rid of carbs completely from your diet to lose weight. So if you're like most people, I'm positive this thought has come across once or twice. You've probably thought about considering things like the keto diet, or maybe even changing things up and going low carb. Now, I guess the real idea is that if you eat carbs, you normally see a spike in your weight. And usually when you decrease carbs, you start to see some rapid weight loss. So in today's video, let's really look at this whole idea of, do you need to remove carbohydrates from your diet to lose weight? Or can you lose weight? Can you lose fat specifically while still keeping carbohydrates in your diet? So we're starting right now. Hey, what's up everyone? Coach Eric Bolin here. Man, do I love carbohydrates. I mean, I just had carbs for my breakfast. We all enjoy them, but if your goal is to lose weight, should you remove them from your plan? And I would answer this in two ways. So the way that we're really going to break this up is we're going to look at who deserves carbohydrates and what I actually mean by deserve. And then second, we're going to look at who doesn't deserve carbohydrates. So let's jump right into it. Number one, if you are lean and you train hard, you are resistance training, you are doing cardio, you are getting more than 10,000 steps a day, or you're just averaging 10,000 steps. When you take your shirt off, you don't have love handles spilling over onto your hips. Well, for the most part, I would say carbohydrates are 100% okay for you. But now let's look at the other type of person. Let's say, for example, you are not that active. You're not necessarily training. Maybe you're getting your steps in, you're following my advice, like the video that I did here where I'm talking about using walking to accelerate fat loss. So let's say you are doing that approach. Well, if that is what your fitness level looks like, and let's say that you also have about 30 to 40 plus pounds to lose, then I would say carbohydrates are probably not going to be the best thing. Now, don't get me wrong. This does not mean you have to completely omit them from the diet. So that's exactly what we're going to look at today. So we know that if you're lean and you're training hard, you deserve carbohydrates. And here's the reason why. Here's the quick and short answer. Okay. I think those mean the same thing. Number one, when you don't have that much fat left on your body because you are lean, well, you need some type of exogenous fuel source, and carbohydrates are probably the best fuel source to provide you with the energy that you need to do the activity that you are doing. Now, on the other hand, someone who is overweight and you have a lot of fat tissue on the body and you're not as active, well, bringing in another exogenous form of energy does not necessarily make sense if your goal is to lose fat when you have an entire reservoir of energy just sitting on your body. And I think this is the reason why low carb diets are so effective. Whether you prescribe to a keto diet, which I've used before many times with clients with a high success rate, or you use a low carb diet. And the reason why is because you are removing carbohydrates. So yes, number one, you are getting that temporary loss of water. So you are going to see some quick results on the scale. And sometimes that, that drop in weight that's temporary, and it's not necessarily fat tissue that you've lost, but sometimes that motivates us and it makes us feel like, hey, this is working. And the other reason why it could be pretty effective is, well, if you are overweight, well, you probably are experiencing some form, whether it's mild or severe, of insulin resistance. And I made this other video here going into how insulin resistance can pretty much be a thing that could be preventing you from losing fat and building muscle in the gym. And so when we look at these things, it makes sense to kind of reduce your carbohydrate consumption if your goal is to lose fat. But that's not necessarily to say that you can't enjoy a slice of bread every now and then. It's not to say that you can't have some chips and enjoy some foods with your family and stuff. And so now let's kind of look at that. So let's say, for example, that we have already established, okay, you are not the athlete who deserves carbs, who is shredded to the bone. Let's say you need to lose some weight, you want to lose some fat, and you are struggling with carb cravings, and you're struggling with, do I just completely get rid of them? Or what happens if I bring them back in? Am I just going to blow up like a balloon? So let's look at that. So first and foremost, what I would say is when you get started with your nutrition plan, with your diet. What I like to do with my clients is I like to give them about 1 to 2 weeks of no carbohydrates. Now, that's not to say they're not having things like fruit. So maybe I should clarify. They are still having a single serving of fruit, and they're still having about 50 to 100 grams of carbs from things like non-starchy vegetables, right? And also obviously their fruit intake is going to contribute to that as well. So it's not necessarily like 0 grams or 15 grams, unless you're doing keto. And if you're doing a keto approach, and let's say I'm sitting down with a client and they do want to try that, well, then I would have to keep their carbohydrate consumption somewhere between 25 to 50 grams of carbs maximum, just to make sure that I'm not kicking them out of ketosis. And so you have multiple options here. And I think that's the great thing. So let's say, for example, after those 2 weeks, you might ask, well, then what do I do for a client? Well, I usually will have some type of consultation with them beforehand and really get to understand their food preferences, the foods they dislike, what foods they love and they enjoy. And usually most of the time carbs are in that, right? People love carbs. That's how we abuse them and we get overweight really quickly. And so I kind of develop a list beforehand. And so let's say, for example, a client tells me, I love oatmeal, I love bread, and occasionally I love snacking on chips. Well, I know that I will probably remove those things from the plan in the first 2 weeks just to kind of get some fat loss to occur, just to get some weight loss moving, and also just to give their pancreas a break from producing so much insulin. And then after that time window, I will start to slowly implement carbohydrates back into their diet and test to see how their body responds. And I'll give you guys a good example. So just someone that I've been working with recently, who's recently over the last, I think it's been 6 weeks already, they've already lost about 15 pounds of pure fat tissue. Their body fat is down around 8%. And the way that we've done it is same thing. First 2 weeks, kind of decrease the carb intake for the most part, right? Mainly just getting it from starchy vegetables or non-starchy vegetables, sorry. And then fruit intake as well. And then once we get past that part, right after I've had that consult and I know what what they want, then we are gonna implement something. So on week 3, what I ended up doing for this guy is he liked bread. So we found a more lower glycemic bread. So not necessarily going for white bread or anything, but we went for rye bread, for example, and he enjoyed that, right? He's had like a little piece of butter on it, not too much, maybe like a tablespoon. And then he had his rye bread with the breakfast that he's already been having. So what we did is we had a slow implementation of carbs, test to see how the body responds to it. And what I mean by respond is, does he get tired? Does he feel like he has more energy? Does he have more energy when he trains? So I'm monitoring all this stuff. Now, this is one of the luxuries that, obviously my clients have when I'm working with them one-on-one, because I monitor everything, right? What is their mood like? How much energy do they have? What does their sleep look like? If I give them carbohydrates, do they get better sleep? Are they able to train harder? Are they hitting better numbers in the gym when we're training? So there's a lot of different variables that we're tracking, which gives me the data to say, okay, I think your body is handling these carbohydrates a lot better. I think you're becoming a little bit more insulin sensitive. So maybe we can try to increase the carbohydrates just a little bit more. And then once again, test and retest. And then the moment I start to see, okay, let's say, for example, they were at 50 grams of starchy carbs, right? So let's say I gave them 1 cup of rice now at their lunch time. And then we would test, right? We would see, okay, does weight spike up? Does their average weight increase now that that is in their daily plan? And if they train in the gym, am I seeing an increase in energy now? Another thing I'm looking for is, are they getting stronger? So these are all the variables that I'm looking at when I'm giving a client carbohydrates. And because this is really the reason why. You can bring carbohydrates in if your goal is to lose weight. It's not an issue. The thing that you have to get over is the fact that your weight might spike up when you bring carbs in. But that's not a bad thing. We have to remember that the role of carbohydrates is to fill up the muscle tissues with glycogen. And besides that, it's also going to retain water a little bit more than if you didn't have carbohydrates in your nutrition plan. So if you factor in that you are eating carbs now, which is more calories, number 1. Number 2, your muscle tissues are now being filled with glycogen a little bit more, right? That's more weight. And then number 3, you're more likely to be retaining water. Well, now that makes sense on why your weight is spiking up, but that doesn't mean the weight is spiking up from more fat. So, an increase in weight, if it's healthy weight, is not a bad thing to help accelerate fat loss over time. Another way that I really like to explain this to people is, let's say, just picture your best body, right? Picture the body of your dreams, right? So let's say right now you watching this, you're 175 pounds, and in your head you're like, I want to get down to 150. Like 150 that's my weight that I had at my wedding. I was at my best. That's when my clothes fit me the best. So that's the weight that's like stuck in your head. But let's say you have like this idea of a dream body and you're like, oh, I want to look like Brad Pitt from Fight Club, right? Or whatever it may be. I want to look like Wonder Woman. If I said I could snap my fingers and give you that body, would you care what the weight was? Like, no, you would not care what your weight was, right? You wouldn't care because you're not really focused on the weight. You're focused on what you believe that weight might look like. And that's what I want you guys to really think about. And that's the thing I want you guys to get in your head is that, yes, we can use weight as a measurement to get a good idea of, where you are and where you probably should be. But really what we're looking for is changes in body composition. And so this is the whole idea of carbohydrates. You can think about them as like heavy batteries, right? So like, let's say, for example, you are bringing carbs back into your diet and all of a sudden you've gained 5 pounds. Well, that's not like you gained 5 pounds of fat. The way I want you guys to think about it is very simple. This is the way I explain it to my clients. Imagine, you are lean, and I give you a 5-pound battery and I put it in your back pocket. And then you go step on the scale. Well, yeah, your body composition didn't change, but because you are carrying that extra energy battery pack, yeah, it weighs 5 pounds. And this is the way I want you guys to think about the weight increases that you might experience when you eat carbohydrates, is that it's like a battery pack. It's extra energy. And your body is saying, hey, are you going to use this, right? Are you going to put it to good use? Because if you're not, well, I'm just going to store it as fat. I'm going to convert it. And so this is the big issue with carbs, is that the body doesn't have many uses for it outside of energy. And carbohydrates or glucose or glycogen is not a good source of long-term energy. Fat tissue is. And I think this is the thing that you guys have to understand, is that your body prefers fat as a fuel source when it comes to thinking about things long term. So now this is really the tricky thing about carbohydrates. If you're going to bring them back into your diet, you have got to utilize that extra energy source by burning it off through increased levels of activity. And so this is really the decision. That's up to you. If you want to bring carbs back in because you enjoy them, I would suggest primarily just making sure you're going to burn off those extra calories by increasing your total levels of activity, training harder in the gym. But if you're not planning on resistance training, number one, if you're not planning on increasing cardio or your activity, then the best way that I would suggest bringing carbs back into your diet plan is to remove something else. And so let's say, for example, right now you're on a 1,500 calorie plan. You have no carbohydrates in your diet. Well, you wouldn't want to bring in a slice of bread because let's say that slice of bread's 150 calories per slice. Let's say you bring 2 in, right? That's 300 calories right there. So if you don't change anything else in your plan and you add on top of it, well, what is that? That's 1,800 calories now. And so this is the thing that I want you guys to think about. So there's multiple ways that you guys can do this. And yes, I know it's frustrating. And this is really the benefit of coaching. It just takes the whole guesswork out of it. But the whole purpose of this channel is to teach you guys how to do this yourselves so that you can be the healthiest and fittest that you've ever been before without all the confusion of like, what do I do? The way that I highly suggest doing it is just think, what else can I remove, right? If I want to bring in 2 slices of bread on that given day, let's say that's 300 calories. Well, what can I remove from that day that's 300 calories? Ideally, I wouldn't suggest removing protein. I would suggest looking at your fat intake, maybe decreasing the fat intake a little bit, and then bringing the carbs in to replace that. And this is the cool thing because fats are, they're more than double the amount of calories per gram than like protein and carbs. So, I mean, if you remove 1 tablespoon of oil from, let's say, like a salad that you make, that's like 150 calories right there. Right there you go. Now you can add in that slice of bread that you've been craving. And I think this is a good way to keep things long term. And this is why I also suggest track your foods. I know a lot of people don't track their foods. I mean, you can eat intuitively if you want, but if you track your foods, it gives you room to have the things that you might be craving without having to just suffer, right? And I think if you want long-term success, I think there's a lot of research out there that shows that people who take a more flexible approach to their nutrition and to their dieting see more long-term results than those who follow a very rigid approach. So when it comes to the carbohydrate issue, it's not bad. You guys don't have to worry about it. You don't have to get rid of them for the rest of your life. I do think that overall, if you want to be healthy and you are not that active, that it is beneficial for you to follow more of a low carb approach. And I think your body will thank you for that. And I think you will thank you for that because you will be prioritizing more vegetables, more healthy animal proteins, and more healthy fats. And you will be getting rid of those things like rice, potatoes, breads, the things that can easily add up in terms of calories. And if you guys aren't burning off those extra calories, if you're not using them as a fuel source, you're just going to be adding on more weight over time that's not needed, and you will be experiencing more health issues as your fat levels start to go up. So it's up to you. Do you want to be active? Which I highly suggest, be as active as you can, get in the gym. There are so many health benefits to being or to resistance training. So I suggest everyone, don't just look at the diet portion. You have to get in the gym. You have to start training. I know most gyms are closed, but there's home workouts that you guys can do, right? Do some push-ups, try some wall sits. If you can't even squat your own body weight, do wall sits, right? Do something. Try to be active. Resistance training doesn't necessarily mean you have to pick up some dumbbells and barbells. It just means you need to place some type of resistance on the muscles. And you can do that very easily in your home with your own body weight. So look, if you guys have questions on this, just go ahead and leave them in the comments below. And another thing, you guys can watch this video here, okay? And it'll help explain the diets a little bit better in terms of like figuring out what you want to do. And then also that right there is my free ebook. Go ahead and check it out. It's 8 weeks of training and nutrition. It's a great way for you guys to get started. It's yours for free. If you have no idea where to start, I highly suggest checking that out right there. And then once again, like and subscribe. And as always, guys, stay strong, and I'll see you next time.